All right, let's talk about something that can cause a lot of stress in a hospital, the NABH audit. It feels like this huge, mysterious process, but what are the auditors really looking for? How does it all work? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify the entire scoring system. You'll see exactly how your hospital's performance is measured. So let's dive right in. This quote right here, it hits the nail on the head. This is the absolute core idea behind accreditation now. The NABH, they're just not impressed by some huge binder full of policies sitting on a shelf collecting dust. No way. What they really want to see is results in action. They're looking for proof, for evidence of high-quality care that's happening consistently, every single day. So the big question is, how do they do it? How does NABH take all the crazy, complex work that happens in a hospital and boil it down to an objective score? Well, it turns out the whole system is built on two key parts that work together. Think of it like this. One part tracks your performance over the long haul, and the other part verifies it on the ground, in person. Let's break both of those down.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the goal here. The whole point of this modern approach to audits is to be completely objective. It's all about getting rid of guesswork and replacing it with cold, hard data. We're moving way beyond just asking, hey, do you have a policy for that? And instead asking, does that policy actually work?
And that brings us right to the first big component, quality indicators, or as you'll hear them called, QIs. The best way to think about these, they're like your hospital's live performance dashboard. Seriously, this isn't about a one-off audit. It's about continuously tracking your results, month in and month out.
So what exactly are they? Well, QIs are these really specific, evidence-based numbers. They're basically the vital signs for your entire hospital. They let you see what's going on, help you spot problems before they get out of hand, and let you benchmark your performance. Ultimately, they're how you prove you're delivering safe and consistent care. And look at this. These indicators cover pretty much everything. We're talking clinical stuff, like infection rates, but also operational things, like how long equipment is down, and even the patient experience. But here's the absolute key takeaway. NABH doesn't just want you to collect the data. That's the easy part. They expect you to dig into it, analyze it, figure out the root cause of any issues, and then show them exactly what you did to fix it.
Okay, so if the QIs are your hospital's ongoing report card, how does an auditor actually check your work when they show up for inspection day? Well, that's where the second big piece of the puzzle comes in, objective elements, or OEs. You can think of this as the auditor's super detailed checklist that they carry around with them while they're walking through the halls. Basically, every big, broad NABH standard gets broken down into these very specific, measurable checks. And to see if you're actually doing it, the auditors use this technique called triangulation. It's pretty smart, actually. They look at your documents, they talk to your staff, and then they physically watch care being delivered with their own eyes. They check from 3 different angles. Here's a perfect example of how this works. Let's say you have a really broad standard like ensure safe medication practices. Okay, how do you measure that? It's pretty vague, right? Well, the objective element makes it super concrete. It says something like, all medication orders are reviewed by a qualified professional. See? Now an auditor can just go check the patient files to see if it's happening. It's a clear, simple yes or no check. And we're not just talking about a few dozen of these checks. Across all of the NABH chapters, auditors are looking at over 500 of these objective elements. Just let that sink in for a second. That number alone tells you how incredibly detailed and thorough this whole process is. And every single one of those, it counts towards your final score. Okay, so we've got the long-term data from your quality indicators, and we've got the on-the-ground proof from the objective elements. So now let's get to the good part. How does NABH mash all this together to come up with your final score? And that really brings us to the question you're probably asking right now. When that auditor is standing there looking at just one of those 500+ elements on their checklist, how do they actually score it? Well, the system is actually surprisingly simple. Every single one of those objective elements gets graded on this basic 3-point scale. You get a 10 if you're fully compliant. You're doing it right all the time.
You get a 5 for partially compliant, which kind of means, yeah, the process is there, but it's not being followed consistently. And you get a big fat 0 for not compliant. That means there's a serious gap that needs to be fixed.
And this is where those scores get really serious. First, you have to score at least 70% in every single chapter. Not an average, in each one. So consistency is everything. If you dip below 50% in even one chapter, you could be denied accreditation. Now, any element that scores a 5 or a 0, that gets flagged as a non-conformity, or NC. That's a red flag, something you absolutely have to fix. They might also give you opportunities for improvement, or OFIs, for things that are okay but could be even better.
All right, so imagine this. The on-site assessment is finally over. The auditors have packed up and left the building. Phew, right? Well, not so fast. The work isn't over. In fact, you could argue that what happens next is the most important part of the whole process.
So here's what happens. First, your hospital gets that detailed report, listing out all those nonconformities we just talked about. And as soon as you get it, the clock starts ticking. You usually have about 1 to 3 months to fix every single one of those issues, and this is key, provide documented evidence that you fixed it. Only after you submit all that proof and they review it does NABH make its final decision. So what's the secret sauce here? How do you make this whole thing less terrifying? Here's a pro tip. The hospitals that really nail this don't just scramble a few weeks before an audit. No, they use tools like a digital quality dashboard to keep an eye on their QIs and OEs in real time, all the time. It completely changes the game from cramming for the test to just being in a constant state of readiness. And really, that brings us to the final, and I think most important question you can ask. This is what the whole NABH process is trying to get at. Are you just collecting data for the sake of it, or are you actively using those quality indicators to make real, tangible improvements? Because at the end of the day, it's not about the certificate you hang on the wall. It's about that shift from collecting numbers to using them to make patient care safer and better. That's the real win.